So, John, why don't you tell me about Queen Anne? As what was Queen Anne like growing up for you?
Well, in retrospect, when we get together and talk with our friends, we realize now that how good we had it. We were on top of Queen Anne Hill, kind of in our own community, but at the foot of the hill was the World's Fair, the Seattle Center, downtown Seattle. So we were living up above the city, and it was a neighborhood that was, for want of a better word, leave it to beaverish. It
Sounds
was.
idyllic.
It was. There wasn't at that time, as now it's become quite fluent. At that time, it was just mainly working class, but it was middle class America in the middle of the city, and it felt like a small town, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. And further on that, it was still somewhat segregated by, like, my grandparents were Italian immigrants, so down here where we're at right now was basically Little Italy. Inner Bay was a lot of Czechoslovakian kids, and so it was still had its flavor of culture, which again was cool. The schools we walked. I walked to every school I ever went to. Played sports. Had a bowling alley. Hop on the 3 or the 4 bus, go downtown, and within 10 minutes we were in a whole other world. So in that respect, it was probably unique. And then '62, when the fair hit, it got actually even cooler. And everything was high school was a big part of our lives. Friday night football games, we'd come down to the stadium. Everybody would go to practices at the school and watch. It was a very tight knit community in a just a really special way.
Nice, nice, and that's sort of how I grew up as well. I mean, you're a good 8 years older than I am, so I mean, you and I didn't play together as children. I I knew who you were because you were a pretty famous baseball player on Queen Anne in Little League as well as in high school.
Really?
And I have older sisters that knew who you were because, to be honest with you, John, you had bright eyes and blonde hair, and the girls were in love with you.
Hey, keep talking, man. I'm finding this out.
I mean, but you were a pretty famous baseball player on Queen Anne.
That's fun. I take that very kindly. The thing that I find fascinating now is, in retrospect, we're finding out that our grandmothers were very close in location, right down at the foot of the hill.
Yeah, yes,
It
their
was that
proximity is
Italian
blocks.
neighborhood,
Very,
and
yeah,
I'm sure my
exactly.
grandmother hung out with your grandmother, and nobody spoke English.
Yeah.
It had the flavor of everybody had a winery making wine in the basement. A lot of those guys were garbage men, and they were garbage men. My grandpa was a garbage man for 50 years, and they
Right.
were making wine out the back and making their money by delivering it. And it turns out that in the end
They
they
were
were
neighbors.
2 blocks apart, and
Yeah,
we didn't
that's
even
right.
know it until now.
That's
And
right.
that
Right.
was. And now you go over there and there's $1 million condominiums and nobody even know what you're talking about. And in that case, there's no Italians left. So we do have that common
Yeah, that
common
common
bond,
thread. Yeah,
that common
yeah.
thread, which is
Yeah,
unique.
I mean, we're both well. You're more Italian than I am. I'm half Irish. So, but my parents met at the local Catholic grade school.
Yeah.
My parents both went to Sacred Heart Church at Seattle, Sacred Heart of Seattle, and went to grade school there. They were married there. They went to high school at the local Catholic high schools and lived on Queen Anne. I mean, they grew up on Queen Anne.
Yeah.
They raised their children on Queen Anne.
Yeah.
So I'm third generation born and raised in Queen Anne. I still go to the church that my family went to in the early 1900s.
And my dad went to that grade school, Sacred Heart.
Oh, he did?
Flunked kindergarten because he couldn't speak English. Because none of the people can picture that now, right? And so that is again where we probably understand each other a little better than some people, is that because that is lost. I mean, that is gone.
Yeah.
It was, but it was a long time ago too.
It
Gotta
was.
be
It
real.
was.
That's
So,
reality.
you flash forward, 1964.
Yeah.
Patrick Nolan is born. I have 4 siblings older than me and 2 more on the way. And I'm going to the Catholic school at the top of Queen Anne where you and your buddies are probably throwing rocks
No,
at
you were
us.
no, no. I'm gonna tell you right now, man. You were throwing rocks at us. I remember the day we would stand up playing. Here come the St. Anne's kids. And, being Catholic, I was in the middle. I knew all you guys, and here they come, man.
No,
Here come the
oh
rocks.
no, I
Here come the
disagree.
Catholics.
Those kids from McClure were coming over and they were
That's funny,
badgering.
man.
They were badgering the kids in the St. Anne's parking lot, playfield, throwing rocks at us.
And now
I remember it vividly. And my 2 older brothers who were thugs, chasing those kids around.
Then now I'm the recess monitor at St. Anne's at the recesses, and a rock being thrown would probably get you kicked out of school and
And possibly put in juvie.
put in juvie. Yeah. So things have changed.
And so, tell me about how it was for you in the 70s when you were in junior high and things started changing then.
To the point of, I guess, why we're here. And yeah, I mean, I have to be, and this is going to be, my unvarnished truth, and we get together at like our reunions, and this topic comes up more and more because we find out that with my friends, the white kids and the black kids too, that we didn't realize half of what was going on, and it was how would I put this? My first experience at Worth McClure was busing had started 72, and the seminal thing that I remember, and I it's probably shaped my politics, and I'll just get right to the chase here. Is it was walking down the hallway, and back then the black kids there was. It was, I can't remember what the ratio was. I'd be a fool to try to guess, but if you were walking down the hallway at Worth McClure in 1972, you had a 50-50 chance of being pulled into the bathroom. And back then the black kids had cake cutters in their hair. And I think their favorite line to us was, "You white MFing Opie Taylor." And they would take the cake cutters to your neck, and they would say, "Give me a quarter." And you was shocking. I mean, it's like, here we are, coming to junior high school. And so what happened one day is, I don't know, I think it was student body something. I was responsible for something, and one of my buddies got pulled into the bathroom, and I can hear it's not going well in there. So I remember racing down to the principal's office, running in there and saying, "Mr. blah, 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 we got a big problem." And blah, blah. And he looked at me and he said, quote, "Get the hell out of here." And so here I was, a 14-year-old kid, and what do? Your buddy's getting the hell beat out of him, and it's happening a lot. I went to, I'm coming from a grade school or authority that you respect, and here I am, the principal, and it was shocking. It left you a little bit perplexed as to where do we go from here now, because you're not gonna know where to turn. And that was the thing that to this day, that was my first experience with busing. And so when I hear the stories and I understand it, I wonder a little bit about, I didn't know, I didn't have anything against anybody, but these kids, frankly, had something against me, and it was because I was white.
And that was the only reason, you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go back, and our staying amongst my friends is, we hear about, institutional racism, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on, right? And our statement is, where were you in 72? Because my first experience couldn't have been more different. And nobody will ever change our minds whatsoever. And so I think, okay, those black kids were learning this from somewhere.
Right.
Who was teaching them all this? And so when I hear that I'm the racist, that does shape you. It has to, and so I do wonder what what were we expected to do? And I can explain. We're going back and forth, but I can explain further where this went. And in the end, it got interesting. You know, I take all the way through high school, but that was the genesis of my experience with busing. That's just the truth. You know?
Right. And so, this experience with this principal,
Yeah. Yeah.
was that also the kind of experience that you had with other teachers or parents within the system, or people that worked in the system? I mean, it sounds like the principal was not helpful at all.
No, answer your question. I mean, you got to remember this is '72, and and again looking back at it now, we didn't know what was going on politically. We were kids, right?
Right.
And but that was at the height of the anti-war movement, and you were getting, between the college deferments and that kind of thing, there were an influx of teachers that were coming from the streets, of the protest streets. They just were, and that deferment thing was odd. But it did, or you came out of college with a certain perspective and you became a teacher. So to specific to your question, most of the teachers at that time it had changed over. These young kids, teachers with long hair. I mean, we had one teacher OD'd and just crashed and killed not too far from here when he was 15, shooting heroin. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, these teachers, it was, and smoking a lot of weed, and so that was there. And so here you are, and that is a whole nother shock to your system, right?
Yeah.
So if you had, and my parents were pretty conservative. They Italian immigrant, worked like dogs. German immigrant, and so here you are, and now that's how we were raised to respect things. And what we were seeing was, frankly, a lot of disrespect for a lot of things that we believed in, and so if you weren't strong, I'm fairly strong-minded and willed, and so I tended to stand up to it, and as did a number of my friends, but some didn't, and it was a challenge.
And so were there, I mean, would you say on a daily basis, John, that there was a fight in the hall amongst
Yeah.
yourself or other people that you associated with? I mean, did you guys, or for that matter, did you guys ever, did you get along with the kids that were coming from other
Absolutely.
areas?
And that takes me into that whole context of, to this day, the black kids that would stand up for us. I mean, and that was the fascinating thing about this, is that they're the ones who almost took it the worst, because here, what they're going to call them, every name in the book, right? But these kids, they didn't care what color you were. They were like, they didn't care. So when if they saw black kids banging on a white kid, they were right there with us, right? And if they saw white kids doing the wrong thing, well, guess what? They're gonna whack you, man. And those are my friends. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, absolutely. But they were not in the majority. But they were strong kids, tough kids, and they didn't care what anybody thought. So that's kind of what we coalesced around. Was my, and we were athletes, right? And so we tended to be
Tough.
we were that's what happened is, to jump ahead a little bit, is that by the time we were in, say, ninth grade, we had enough, and we realized that it's time to fight back. And that's when things got interesting, because now we go into the bathroom with 5 of us. You want to do something, it's on you. And that's what led to the fights. We usually have them outside, back by the garbage cans at the school. Those were pretty good ones, man. And there was the thing is where's the authority? That's what just blew our mind. But it was like, what is this? And so now, looking back on it, this is what busing did. Is this good? I don't I mean,
Yeah, so just to kind of jump in a little bit, with my experience, I think my experience with busing was, I went from going to my neighborhood Catholic school to going to an inner city Catholic high school and not liking it. It was an all boys school, and I was not happy there. So I begged my mother, who raised 7 children on her own. My parents were divorced when I was 7. My mother had 7 kids in the house under the age of 12, and she put us all through Catholic school, with help from my grandparents. But she did an amazing job. Now I literally had to beg her not to send me to this Catholic school. But anyhow,
you're talking the Catholic elementary school,
no, the
or the high
Catholic
school.
high school.
Oh, so you started at the high school?
I started.
Oh, I
at
didn't
the
realize that.
Yeah. I was at O'Day for a year.
You went to O'Day?
Yeah, I did for a year.
No girls.
I didn't like
There's
it.
no girls.
No girls, but
I coached up there. There's no girls.
I just didn't like it. Wasn't for me. I was a big kid at a school where they really liked athletes, and I was not an athlete. And I worked every day after school. Anyhow, my point is that my opportunity to go to Queen Anne, my local my local high school, was taken away from me because they had decided that Queen Anne was going to be closed in '81.
And the reasons for that are, apparent.
And some of the reasons are probably because of busing.
White flight.
Yeah.
It's funny. In some way, you can say that we lost the high school. If you really want to get, and it wasn't totally white flight, but there was some changing demographics. But yeah, it took the heart and soul out of the community, man.
It did.
So you went to where?
So I actually had 3 choices. Now, as a young man, not having a lot of money, I was either going to go to Garfield, and at the time, Garfield was a really tough high school.
Yeah.
And growing up in an all-white neighborhood and not knowing much about other cultures other than my white neighborhood, my Italian and Irish friends, I shied away from going to Garfield because, to be honest with you, I knew I wouldn't have my older brothers there to, have my back.
Defend you.
And my brothers were
Irish.
My brothers beat the hell out of me
Right.
at every chance they got.
Right. You're Irish.
But my brothers always defended me. So one of the great things about my life as a young man was that I had these brothers that if somebody came up to me
Yeah.
when I was at St. Anne's or O'Day, and they were giving me a bad time, I would just look at them and go, "Do you know who Jeff Nolan is?" And they'd be like, "Oh man, Pat, I was just kidding, man."
So they went to O'Day?
No, but they had a reputation. My brothers had a big reputation, and people didn't mess with me. So that was a blessing. But so I ended up. The reason I went to Franklin was the school bus was a half a block from my back door, so I could roll out of bed and get on the bus. But that was it. It was Garfield, Franklin, or I could have went to Ballard, which is where I should have went because it was relatively close to my house. But I chose Franklin because of the bus situation. Because Ballard, I would have to pay to get on the bus, and Franklin, I could take the school bus. But I'd never been on a school bus. I'd never been on any bus other than a city bus to go to O'Day.
What time did you have to get up?
I had to get up at 6:15 to be on the bus at 6:30 to go all the way across town to a school that I knew nothing about, in a community I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And when I got there, the culture was very different. It was very Asian and black folks that were there, which was fine. I was fine with that, but I had not really experienced that. There were a lot of black kids at O'Day, but the way that the schools were run So at O'Day, it was very, very structured. You'd go to class, and you'd start class at 8:45, and it went for 55 minutes, and the instructor would instruct for 50 minutes. You had 5 minutes from the time
Well,
the class was over.
no, the brothers would whack you upside the head.
Exactly. Where at Franklin, it was chaos, and
I've heard this.
it was very chaotic there for me. But luckily, I will say, the first week that I was there, I remember I was in biology class, Mr. Van's biology class, and I was doing the classes were so disorganized, and I don't know why that was, but there was always at least 30 minutes to do the homework that was given by the instructor. So I would be there in class doing my homework, And there were these two guys, Emilio Valavala and Romeo. I can't think of Romeo's last name, but they were two
Samoan?
huge Samoan dudes. Now they were very intimidating. I was a little bit intimidated by them, but they said, "Hey man, hey, let me see your homework." So they would copy my paper every day. So that was the first week. I made friends with these two big Samoan dudes, and you know what? From that point on, I never had a single problem at Franklin.
But what
I mean,
what if you had not made friends with them?
I don't know. It would have been a very different experience. I actually, when I graduated from Franklin, Emilio came to my house in Queen Anne to celebrate our graduation. It was amazing, and I had a great experience at Franklin, but the whole busing thing, having to leave my own community and be bused to a school where I also kind of felt like what you're saying is, although it was opposite, it was like an opposite experience, because I went from an all white community to all black Asian community where I really wasn't initially very welcomed.
Because why? Because you're white, or
Yeah,
because
I was white.
right? And that's my nephews were age, and my sister they just thinks it just had a terrible effect on my nephews because they went to Franklin and Garfield, right? And they're telling me the same, but they didn't have the two Samoan friends.
Right,
And,
right. I felt very fortunate. It was like, I was letting them use my homework or my answers to be my bodyguards almost. I mean, we would literally, John, we would walk down the hall. We would walk down the hall, and it was like the parting of the Red Sea. I mean, people literally.
Comes a white dude with the two Samoans.
I mean, Emilio was probably. I was a little taller than him, but he had an afro that was like.
They were big, man.
He had a huge afro, and this is even in the '80s. He had a big afro, and Romeo looked like a linebacker. I mean, he was not as tall, but he was just pure muscle, and it was for me that was a great experience. But they asked us to bring some memorabilia from Queen Anne or Franklin, and I couldn't find my yearbook. But one of the stories I was going to tell about my yearbook is, most people at the end of the school year, they get their yearbook and they go up to all their friends and they say, "Hey, John, sign my yearbook, write something cool in there." Every yearbook that I have does not have one signature in it because I just really didn't have. Right. I didn't have any friends really there. Even the kids on the school bus that were white. You know what? I was not friends with them really because I had gone to private school my whole life.
So that sense of community was gone.
It was gone
which
for
I
me. Yeah.
just thrived on.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, I was going to try to think, okay, what I want to talk about here, and I think I told my first story, which was pretty intense, and but I can kind of there's three things. The next thing that I thought about is, okay, and this is it's funny and it's also here, I'll tell you the story. We had a kid come from South Africa, and back then, these kids are coming out of apartheid and stuff. So this is in 9th grade, and I'll never forget this, man. This dude he was a white kid. He was one bad dude, right? So he walked up to me one day, and he looks at me, and he goes, "I hear you're the toughest kid in school. I'll kick your ass." And I looked at him and I said, I ain't the toughest kid in school, man, but Michael Boswell is. And where's Michael? And Michael Boswell was one bad dude, black kid, right? So I said, well, I think he's in metal shop right now. And
Making a shiv? No.
to the fight, this thing, you could hear these two guys going at it, banging off of walls. I mean, it was on, right? And afterwards, they made it into some big racial thing. And so I was thinking about it. I go, wait a minute. So I went into the principal and I said, look this wasn't racial. This he came to me first. Now, white as snow, right? He came to me and wanted to fight. The only reason he went and fought Michael is because I told him the truth, and Michael is the toughest kid in the school. And it got way out of proportion. And so there I was seeing it from another perspective of how, things that weren't even at that, everybody's on edge, right? Mm-hmm. And so things that weren't even racial became racial. Mm-hmm. And that hypersensitivity, so here we go. And that kind of is the product of when you just kind of, frankly, haphazardly throw people together with no rules, you're going to have situations that don't add up. Right.
Well, one of the things at Franklin that was unfortunate was so the year that I went there, 79, 80, it wasn't too bad, but then Queen Anne closed in 81. So 80, 81, 81, 82, the class of 81, 82, so the class of 82 that came to got bused to Franklin because they were at Queen Anne, and now Queen Anne was closed. I mean, though all those kids from Queen Anne, Magnolia, that area that got bused to Franklin, I mean, Franklin turned into, it was like a jungle warfare almost. It was horrible. It was
I heard the stories.
A girl was raped in the hallway in school.
Yeah. No.
There was a knifing outside in the quad. I mean, the police were at the high school on a regular basis. There were situations on the buses. And, I don't blame the minority community that was in Rainier Valley for all this that was happening. I mean, here come these kids that are affluent, that are from Magnolia, from Queen Anne, that, have never experienced what I just experienced the year before, the 2 years before. And now they're all pushed into a space where it's fear. I mean, it's the fear of not knowing.
Abject fear.
Exactly.
It was abject fear.
So.
No, and what you're saying is like I say, both of us have married Filipino girls, right? And
yes,
and my wife came over when she was 8 years old, and she got bused to Whitman, and her I have to be careful what I say here, but her brothers ran the 23rd Street Gang, the biggest Asian gang in the city, and the reason that gang started was they were up there at Gilman Elementary, a couple Filipino kids and black kids were coming beating the hell out of them. So next thing there was 10 Filipinos.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you had 20 Filipinos. And they laugh at me now. And, it got pretty, they have no excuse for their gang. But that was, then when I heard that story, and I go, okay, so that was the genesis of the 23rd Street gang, was that these kids, it was self-preservation. And I could understand that because you do feel like it's self-preservation. You got to know where to turn.
Yeah.
You can't get any help. What are you going to do? I mean, you either fight back or you end up a mess.
And the unfortunate thing is, where were our parents in all this? I mean, my old man was a King County sheriff.
No.
So he wasn't involved in my life to begin with. So he was not going to be around. And my mom was raising 7 kids. And now at this point, most of my older siblings are out of high school. Either my 2 older brothers dropped out of high school. They were out doing whatever they were doing. My sisters are married or going to college, doing their thing. And here's my mom trying to raise her 3 younger children, and she has no time to go across town. My mother never one time went to high school. came to any event that
that
I
right?
was. I don't even think she made it to my graduation, John.
See, that's the difference. My parents never missed a one, and
Yeah.
and my parents they were ready to fight, and they tried everything. My hot blooded Italian dad, my mom, she didn't take North Dakota farm girl, had nothing, right? And
Right.
they said this is crazy, but they got pushed back everywhere they turned. Were in and but that in the end is probably what started the whole end of busing, because there were a lot of lawsuits filed in I think it was the early '80s or whatever. But to answer your question, I think a lot of parents almost couldn't believe what we were telling them,
Yeah.
because it's like, what? No, this is what happened. You want to come up and take a look? Be there at 3 o'clock. He got a bat. He got a bat.
Come on, they weren't saying that. The parents weren't saying
No,
that, were they?
no, we're telling them that.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
many times I walked out. I told my brother, I remember walking out one time, high school kid came, black kid, just laid me out, man. I'm walking out, boom, I'm on the ground. And next thing I know, 2 weeks later, I get the message, my brother's a senior at Queen Anne High School, and I got the word that this has been taken care of. And those kids never came back. And that was like you're talking about your brother. I had the big brother.
Yeah.
And there that was there, and you knew that. And so that was a whole nother dynamic, because that does get us into how this progressed into high school. And I'm talking junior high, right?
Right.
I'm not talking Queen Anne High School yet. And
Right.
that's a whole nother story.
Right.
And but it's funny, in a way, by the time we got to high school, I think we had kind of reached a somewhat of a truce. We're tired of beating each other up,
Right.
and the war had ended. We were all freaked out about going to Vietnam, and then when it ended, the party was on. And I tell people, things got changed in the '70s, mid '70s. My brother and all his friends, they were facing going to Nam. So were we, but then it ended
Right.
and evolved into disco.
Wow, I don't know which was worse.
That was just, no kidding. Jimmy Buffett came along, so but it did change, and so maybe that mellowness kind of it got mellow. Guys are smoking weed and listening to Zeppelin. It changed,
Yeah.
and so but the high school, for your experience with high school, sounds worse than mine, which is odd.
Yeah, it is.
It's odd,
It is a
because
little bit odd, and I think for me at the end, because I was at the kind of the tail end of busing. I think in Seattle. I think Seattle busing stopped around 88, 89.
Yeah.
And it was kind of ran its course, and I don't know. I just think that I experienced something. I think part of it was so bad for us because they started closing schools in the Seattle area. And it was problematic because now they were pushing kids into places that, they didn't want to be. And it was probably all that. It was probably the same way, like for the kids when you were in junior high.
Yeah.
Those kids, they were pushing these kids. So now it's early '70s, and they're pushing these kids into a school that is not familiar. And why? Why? Because they didn't want to have segregation. I mean, society is segregated, unfortunately, and it's still segregated. And we have so many problems with race. I mean, it's just, this is life. It stinks, right? It stinks now.
Right.
It's not getting any better. How can we make it better?
It's not getting better.
I was at a funeral yesterday, and there's all these people sitting on one side of the room and all these other people sitting on the other side of the room. How do you blend those people? It's hard.
Well, and not to get too political, but I want to get back on course. So one more story I'd like to just go over on busing. But yeah,
5 minutes, by the way.
Okay, I'll skip to that. But to tell people not to go to Florida, that's a dangerous. Nobody wants to do that. But fine, okay, my last story is where I will now say that I saw this from the other side was my senior year, and we're playing. I'm not talking my high school football, but this is a pertinent. Is that we were playing West Seattle High School up at West Seattle Stadium, and the kid that had my back the whole time, Stephen Douglas, black kid, and Charlie, I was a center. So we played West Seattle. That school was lily white. First play of the game. Here it comes. We had a little black running back, Vernon Sims. They were calling him names I couldn't believe, right? And it's like, what? So I remember we looked at these guys, tough guys from West Seattle, and so we called them pig farmers. I said, you bunch of redneck pig farmers? You just call them a duda, what? And this went back and it built. Stephen Douglas got thrown into the sideline. They're kicking these. Now it's funny because started this with white kids getting kicked. Now here's my black buddy who stood up for me. They're wailing on this kid in the sideline. So Charlie and I going, I took out the coach. The coach was kicking him. Charlie took out the other guys, and because it was instinctive. It was like, wait a minute.
Right.
What the hell is this all about?
Right.
So after the game, a friend of mine, Bobby Besaw, became a cop. He was the captain of the West Seattle team, and we're walking at midfield, and I go, Bobby, I think we got this under control. To this day, I'm talking to Bobby, and the guy that was the biggest jerk on the West Seattle team was standing behind him. And here's what happened. Vernon Sims had a big metal garbage can, and I'm going, oh no. And he takes it over this guy's head. It was like a Looney Tune card, bent around his head. So the fight was on, man. And I said, Bobby, put your helmet on. And here we are, 6 years later.
Yeah.
The same kids, and we're standing up for Stephen, we're standing up for Vernon, and we're telling these dudes from West Seattle, man, what the hell you think you are?
Yeah.
And, nobody gets, there's a football fight. And then the thing that was funny was Monday morning at our team meeting, Charlie Foy comes walking in. He's got a West Seattle helmet. That was the trophy. And he gave it to Vernon. He said, Vernon, man, you earned this.
Yeah.
And so there is two sides to it.
No, absolutely.
There is.
Yeah, and I get that. And I think in the end, John, I mean, for me, I know that, had I not been bused to Franklin, I probably would have not experienced people of color or, a different culture than had I stayed, say, at O'Day.
Right.
And, in the end, I married a Filipino girl.
We both did.
And, I was born and raised to love everybody. But I also grew up in a family where my grandfather called everybody a racist name.
Yeah.
My father's father was a decent guy, but I mean, he was a racist through and through. But not only did he hate black people and Asian people, he hated Italians. He hated Jews. Right. He hated the Irish. And he was Irish, for crying out loud.
Right. No,
I'm thankful in a way for the busing. I think that as a whole, I don't think the program worked great. But for me, in the end, I'm better for it.
I totally take that to heart. The one thing I'll add, though, is, and I'm probably agreeing with you, is that I do think that this thing about institutional racism, I know where I saw racism to begin with, and it was against me.
Yeah.
And it was, and so the bottom line is I think everybody has the same foibles and the same, weaknesses. And if I wanted to start in 72 again, then I can say, well, they were racist. But if you're going to do that, I guess my point is, where do you stop and start? You're going to go to 16-19? You're going to go to 15-14? You can't do that, man. Everybody is the same, but I'm afraid that only one side, frankly, is getting the majority of I mean, there's black institutional racism. There's white institutional racism. I mean, I'll tell you about the Asians, man. They don't allow, and that's another thing. The Asians, when they were getting the hell beat out of them back in New York, that was black guys beating the hell out of them. Right. So they dropped that narrative quick. And you talk to Asians, they'll tell you right up who they're afraid of. But you don't hear that. It's not. It's not neo-Nazis.
Right.
It just isn't. you have that in your mind, but I know what I saw, and it's not what you're telling me, and that's frankly why I'm here, is because I get tired of it. It's like right racism, nationalism, but wait a minute, man. Everybody's the same, and I think it's causing big problems, and we better get off of it quick. Because people getting fed up. Everybody's getting fed up. And, I'll get political right now. It's like this Tim Scott. Hey, he gets tired of calling, like you said, he gets called Uncle Tim. By who? The left. And I think I have some resonance. Because a lot of people in the black community, they're getting fed up too. So I'll try not, that's the end of my rant.
Well,
I'm
there you
done,
go.
man.
Good.
I got it out.